For today's lesson, we're going to continue working with number lines, and we're going to go to the other side of zero to work with negative numbers today. With today's lesson, we do have quite a few standards that we will be addressing. You can see them all listed here. So 6NS5, 6NS6, 6NS6A, 6NS6C, 6NS7A, and 6NS7B are all of our standards today, working with negative numbers on a horizontal and vertical number line. So we do have many situations in which you can use both positive and negative numbers. Our first example is temperature. When we have cold temperatures in the winter, we would use negative numbers for when that thermometer dips below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Another example is in football. So if a quarterback is sacked behind the line of scrimmage and they are 15 yards behind, we call that a loss of 15 yards. So that would be written as a negative number because you don't want to lose yards in football. But if a running back runs for 30 yards and he gains 30 yards from the line of scrimmage, we would write that as a positive number because that's a good thing because you want to be moving that ball forward. Elevations use positive and negative numbers, and elevations are all based on sea level. And sea level is where the oceans are at, and we call that 0. That's our 0 feet. That's where we start all of our measurements at with elevation. And so if we're above the ocean, that's a positive number. So you can see the top of our mountain is a positive number because that's 7,310 feet above sea level. And then if we're below the top of the water, we call that below sea level, and that is a negative number because we've gone down from there. And then finally, another area that uses positive and negative numbers is the role of finance. So if you have a debit, which if you take the letter I out of the word debit, you get the word debt, and debt means you owe money. So a debit is written as a negative number, whereas a credit, meaning somebody's giving you a value for something, like a store credit, that is a positive number. And essentially what we can do with positive and negative numbers, if it tends to be a good thing, we would call that a positive number. If it tends to be a bad thing, we would call that a negative number. Like losing yards is a bad thing in football, so that's a negative number. Whereas somebody giving you money, that's usually a good thing, so we write that as a positive number. So we have different situations here where we need to determine if that's a positive or negative number. So if it's 36 degrees below 0, the key word here is below, we're going to write that as negative 36. If it's a debit of $10,540, well, again, a debit is very similar to a debt. That's owing money. That's not a good thing. So that's going to be negative $10,540. 29,035 feet below sea level. Again, that word below is key here. So that's negative 29,035. And a gain of 45 yards. Well, gaining yards in football is good. So that's a positive 45. Or for positive numbers, you can just write the number. So we're going to use this table to answer some questions. And the first question is, New Orleans is 8 feet below sea level. And we know that's below sea level because it's a negative number. Mount Davidson is 928 feet above sea level because we can just rewrite that number if it's positive. The deepest location among the 4 locations is Death Valley. Okay. Deep, we use our context clues there. If it's deep, we're going below ground, and getting to negative 282 is going to be farther away from the ground than negative 8 for New Orleans. The highest location among the 4, that is Pilot Mountain. To be high, you're going to be above sea level. And Pilot Mountain has the highest elevation there. It's the largest number. And then the location nearest to sea level is New Orleans. -8 is the closest value to 0 because our sea level is measured at 0. Just like our positive numbers, we can put negative numbers on a number line. On a horizontal number line, all the negative numbers are to the left of 0. And when we are putting our negative numbers on the line, it's a reflection of our positive numbers. So if we think of 0 as a mirror, since the closest positive number to 0 is 1, the closest negative number to 0 would be -1. 2 is the next closest number to 0, so -2 would be the next closest negative number to 0. As we move to the left, remember our values decrease. So 4 is to the right of 1, which makes 4 greater than 1, but -4 is to the left of -1, which means -4 is less than -1. And a lot of times with our negatives, you can kind of think about being in opposite land. Whatever's true about your positive numbers, the opposite will be true for your negative numbers. On a vertical number line, we're just going to put those negative numbers below 0 like they would be on a thermometer. And then same thing, since +1 is the closest positive number to 0, -1 would be the closest negative number to 0. For every positive number, there is a corresponding negative, and they are called opposites. So if the number is 3, its corresponding negative is -3. And like we've said before, they would be the same distance away from 0. The only number that does not have an opposite is 0. 0 is neither a positive nor a negative number, and you can say that 0 is its own opposite or that 0 has no opposite. It means the same thing. So we want to draw a horizontal number line to represent the numbers from 0 to 6 and their opposites. So we've got our horizontal number line. Horizontal, remember, goes left to right. And we put our smallest number all the way on the left-hand side. So if we want numbers from 0 to 6, that means we include 0 and 6, and their opposites. So if we're going to do the opposites, that means not only will we have the positive numbers, but we will also have our negative numbers on there. So if we're doing a number line just from 0 to 6, we know that 6 would be the largest number. And so its opposite, -6, would be the smallest number. So our number line actually does start with -6. And then we would go -5, -4, -3, -2, -1, 0. And with 0, anytime you have a number line that you're creating that has both positive and negative numbers on it, if you want to include 0 on there, I am perfectly fine with that. So if you want to put 0 on any number line that has both positives and negatives, that's perfectly fine. And then after 0, we go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. For our next example here, we're going to draw a vertical number line to represent the following set of numbers. So for our vertical number line, again, we start at the bottom, work our way up, and we put the lowest number at the bottom. So our numbers are -26, -29, -30, -32, and -34. So we start with the lowest number at the bottom. So in this case, we're going to start with -34. If you're having trouble determining which one goes at the bottom, what you can do is think of those numbers as positive. And if they were positive numbers, you would know that 26 goes at the bottom. Well, since they're negatives, everything is opposite. So -26 would go at the top. And if it was positive, 34 would be at the top. So -34 goes at the bottom. Since the numbers that are listed do not have equal spacing all the way through, we have to take that into consideration when we do our number line. So what I would suggest here is this next mark, have that represent -33. Just don't label it. Which would then make this mark -32, Negative 31, don't label it. Negative 30. Negative 29, because that is given. Negative 28, no label. Negative 27, no label. And then negative 26. So oftentimes when we start working with the negatives, it's good to include all those numbers in between. Just don't label the ones that you're not supposed to. So here, we're going to draw a horizontal number line to represent each set of numbers. So for number 1, draw my horizontal number line. Negative 13 is the smallest number, so that goes first. Then I'd make a mark for negative 12, don't label it. Negative 11, negative 10, don't label it. Negative 9, negative 8, don't label. Negative 7, don't label. And then negative 6. For number 2, same idea. Horizontal number line, because that's what our directions tell us. We'd start with negative 8, negative 7, no label. Negative 6, no label. Negative 5, negative 4, negative 3, no label. Negative 2, no label. Negative 1, no label. And then we get to 0. Remember with 0, if you want to put 0 on your number line, that's perfectly fine. So if you want to put the 0 here, even though it's not listed, I'm okay with that. If you don't want the 0, I'm fine with that as well. Your choice. 1, don't label. 2, 3, don't label. 4, don't label. 5, 6, don't label. And 7. And then finally, number 3. For number 3, you need to pay close attention because unlike numbers 1 and 2, number 3, the numbers are not listed in order. So you have to identify your smallest number, which in this case is negative 25. And then we have negative 24, no label. Negative 23, no label. Negative 22. Negative 21, no label. Negative 20. Negative 19. Negative 18, no label. Negative 17, no label. And negative 16. And then finally for today, we're going to write the opposite of each number. So the opposite of negative 14 is positive 14, or you could just write 14. The opposite of negative 9 is positive 9, or just 9. The opposite of negative 17 is positive 17, or just 17. The opposite of 27 is negative 27. The opposite of negative 23 is positive 23, or 23. And then the opposite of 46 is negative 46. And that's all for today's portion of the lesson. As always, I hope this helps.